I just want to know how much money me and my husband spent in an MLM cult. Oh, and by the way, we made it to the top 1%, so we were considered successful. In 2019, we spent $55,530. In 2020, we spent $40,265. In 2021, this is the worst year, we spent $58,092. In 2022, we spent $43,790. In 2023, we spent $49,893. And 2024, the year we got out, we spent $37,508. So we lost $188,350.
I know that was a lot of numbers just being listed off, so you may have zoned out, but the moral of the story here is that her and her husband lost $188,000 over the course of 9 years in Amway. You always feel like your big break is right around the corner. Just stick it out, just keep going, just keep working hard. One day it'll pay off. You're essentially being promised that you're going to make it big one day, and so you live in this state of hope that it's gonna happen to you at any moment. And at some point though, you have to cut your losses. You have to say enough is enough. I'm not wasting any more of my time or money here. I am done. There's a creator on TikTok named Stephanie who's going very viral at the moment for her video series talking about her negative experiences in what she calls a cult. And come to find out, these videos are detailing her experience in the multi-level marketing company Amway. I became aware of Stephanie's videos because I have been tagged in them and sent them and emailed them what feels like hundreds of times at this point. If you're familiar with my MLM horror stories series, you know that in those videos I read emails from people who are detailing all of the negative experiences they've had at the hand of multi-level marketing companies. And Stephanie, as she has recently left Amway within the last year and a half or so, she has taken to TikTok to essentially post the video versions of her horror story. So I think that might be why I've been tagged in her videos so many times, is because you hear me reading these emails and retelling these stories from these people who have been in MLMs. But here is a woman who was in an MLM for a long time and she is filming herself. The words are coming directly out of her mouth and you're hearing firsthand all of the bad things that happened to her. But her experience is unique because she was a young woman who joined Amway when she was in her early 20s. And although Amway is like an OG MLM, they've been around for decades, they are rarely featured on my channel because their reps generally stay off social media. There's not a lot of content about them that I see out there online that I comment on and react to. And it feels like the reps, the independent business owners, or IBOs as they're called, it seems like they're pretty hush-hush about their experience, both while they're in the MLM and afterwards. And here's Stephanie posting these TikTok videos offering us a peek into her experience in this company that really doesn't get a lot of airtime on my channel. So that's what today's video is going to be dedicated to, showing you some of the most provocative videos that Stephanie has posted, featuring some of the more eye-opening aspects of her experience in the company. And of course, I have a lot of thoughts and opinions and commentary to offer, so we'll show you some of the videos and then we'll talk about them. What I was really hoping to be able to do for this video is to interview Stephanie and have her come on and talk about her experience in Amway firsthand and answer some of these questions that I have. But I did send her a message on TikTok requesting an interview, and unfortunately an entire month went by and I never heard back. Maybe she saw my message and she just wasn't interested in being interviewed, which is completely understandable. Or maybe the message just got buried in her DMs and she never saw it. That would also be understandable because she's seen a lot of increased engagement on her platform right now. Maybe it just kind of got lost in the mix. And with that being said, as I'm going through and analyzing her videos, I'm coming from a place of my own understanding and knowledge and opinions. I've been making anti-MLM content on YouTube for 5.5 years now as my full-time job. I've examined countless companies. I've read hundreds of horror stories. I've heard lots of people's experiences. So I'm going to be speaking from my own perspective and offering my own analysis of what I think is going on. But what I'm not trying to do is speak on behalf of Stephanie or put words in her mouth. She has dozens and dozens of videos about her experience in Amway on her TikTok account. So I would really encourage you to visit her account, check out those videos, engage with them, follow her if you'd like to. I'll have her TikTok profile linked below. She goes by Tika Linda Girl on TikTok, which I'd never heard the words Tika Linda before, so I looked it up and it's actually a Spanish phrase that means pretty Costa Rican girl, which makes sense because Stephanie is Costa Rican. She's got 10,000 followers on TikTok currently, and some of her most popular videos about her experience in Amway are pulling in hundreds of thousands to millions of views each. Some brief background about her that I learned from watching all of her videos is that she joined Amway when she was just 21 years old and she was in the company for 9 years. It sounds like the first 2 of those years she was doing Amway alone, and then the remaining 7 years she was actually doing in partnership with her husband, who she met when she recruited him to join Amway through LinkedIn. Together as a couple, they made it to the rank of Q12 Platinum, which sounds really fancy, and this is technically considered to be within the top 1% of the company. But in one of her videos, she talks about how this was the rank right before you start making good money in the company. And that's relevant because she spent 9 years in the company doing everything the right way, following everything to a T, it sounds like. She made it to the top 1%, but it still, in her eyes, didn't pay off. Not necessarily because of any fault of her own, but it speaks to how crappy the business opportunity is more than anything. She and her husband eventually left Amway about a year and a half ago, and she's been posting a ton of TikTok videos detailing her experience, as I keep saying, and she's deconstructing what has happened to her. In fact, she has over 50 videos about Amway on her profile. So what I did is I went through and I watched all 50 of her TikTok videos. Incredibly informative, very entertaining. I encourage you to check them out for yourself. But I went through and I picked out the top 6 that I felt like were the most impactful, the most shocking, and those are what I'm going to share with you today. So definitely go check out her account. Like I said, I'll link it below if you want to see all of her videos. But for today, I'm going to give you pretty much the overview summary of Stephanie's experience and show you some of her most highly engaged with videos, because people are shocked about what she has to say. And what she puts in the bio of her TikTok account is very important. It says, "Everything shared here is said from my experience and perspective." Very smart of her to include that because it functions as somewhat of a legal disclaimer. A lot of the things that she has to say make the company and the Amway business opportunity look very, very bad. She regularly refers to her experience as feeling like she was trapped in a cult. She lays out explicitly how much money she lost over the course of 9 years. I will show you that video. And she talks a lot about how she felt like she was brainwashed and how much Amway damaged her life. So it's very important that she states that everything she's saying is from her own experience and her own opinion, because these companies are very scary. They're extremely wealthy, they hold a lot of power, and they are ruthlessly litigious. They have absolutely no problem dumping millions of dollars into lawsuits trying to take down people who speak negatively about them, even if who they're going after is just a girl on the internet sharing her own opinion. In fact, they're happy to dump money into these lawsuits because they have all the money in the world and they have a reputation to protect, so they will file lawsuits for defamation even with an extremely weak case that they're probably not going to win, but it's still effective at silencing these people who are trying to speak out against them because they know that the defendant is just a girl on the internet and can't afford to fight it. But you know what? It's not defamation if it's true. So how can you tell somebody who was in Amway for nearly a decade that her personal lived experience and the impact that this company had on her life is untrue? It's true for her and she has a right to speak about it, even if it puts the company in a bad light. But it's very important and very smart of Stephanie to put at the top of her account that everything she's sharing there is her own experience, her own opinion, her own perspective. It's not a foolproof legal safety guard. It's not always going to protect you from legal action, but it does work in her favor so that viewers know that she is speaking for herself of her own experiences and so that people know where she's coming from, because a lot of what she has to say is very damning. It does not make the company look very good. And you know what? The same legal disclaimer goes for me too. Everything I say in this video is a matter of my own opinion, my own thoughts, feelings, and perception and reaction to the videos of Stephanie's that I'm going to be showing you today. I'm excited to get into it, but first I'd love to tell you about today's sponsor, Good Chop. Good Chop delivers high quality American meat and seafood straight to your door. I've been getting Good Chop deliveries for over 2 years now, and my freezer is always stocked because of it, and I love that. The boxes are fully customizable, and the cuts of meat come to you vacuum sealed and flash frozen at peak freshness, so you just pop them right into your freezer to cook them whenever you want to. There are over 100 menu items to choose from, including USDA choice and prime steaks, 100% grass-fed beef, wild-caught seafood, organic chicken, responsibly raised pork, and so much more. In this box, I got Alaskan sockeye salmon, thick-cut bacon, chicken thighs, filet mignon, bavette steaks, and chicken wings. And this week I thawed out the bacon to use on some slider sandwiches that my family loves. I made these with ham, lettuce, tomato, cheese, and of course the star of the show, the bacon. I did have some of it left over, so I crumbled it up and made scrambles with it throughout the week for breakfast. And later in the week I cooked the bavette steaks in the cast iron with garlic and butter and rosemary. These turned out so good. This cut of meat is really tender. Unlike many other companies, Good Chop sources its meat and seafood exclusively from American farms and fisheries, and they're so confident you'll love it, which is why they offer a 100% money back guarantee. Either you love Good Chop or you get your money back. As I said, I've been getting Good Chop deliveries for over 2 years now. I've always had a positive experience, and I'm confident that you'll enjoy it too. You can go to goodchop.com/ amway.com/YouTube or click the link in the description box below and use my code 50HannahAlonzo at checkout to get $50 off plus free shipping on your first order. Again, to get $50 off plus free shipping, you can go to goodchop.com/YouTube and use my code 50HannahAlonzo. Thanks again, Good Chop, for sponsoring today's video. No better place to start with this than by letting Stephanie explain how exactly she got involved with Amway to begin with.
Story time of how I got recruited into the cult that I was stuck in for 9 years. All of my 20s, literally all of my 20s, gone. So I walk into the gym one day and there was a couple there that was sampling out energy drinks and they were also doing a drawing. I remember telling the lady, oh, I never win anything, I'm not doing that. And she was like, well, you never know. So I put my number in there and then she calls me a week later and she said, funny you said you never win anything, guess what? You won. Little did I know that everybody won. Everybody won. She called everybody in that box and said, hey, you're the winner. And that was the way of like building a relationship and a friendship with every single person in hopes to eventually recruit them in. About a month after that, she calls me and says, hey, are you looking for ways to make extra money outside of your dental assisting job that I was working at the time? I was also 21 years old. Due to the nature of how I met them, I thought it was going to be a job going from gym to gym selling energy drinks. So we set up a meeting to meet at Starbucks. They show me the compensation plan, which was an MLM structure. I had never seen an MLM before. I didn't even know what they were. But they said they can help me make $70,000 in my spare time, putting in like 10 hours a week, and then that it was going to be an asset of ongoing income. So once we get that done, it's going to pay me for the rest of my life. They also were adamant that I went to this meeting where there was like 500 different people that were also a part of the same thing. So I was like, oh, there's a lot of people doing this. This is normal. And they were very adamant about introducing me to other single ladies in the environment as well. So that I could be like, oh, there's people like me that are also doing this. And for me to start building those friendships also. And from there, it was just downhill, very slow brainwashing to the point where I woke up one day and I'm like, what is my life? Ugh.
I thought this was very eye-opening, her explaining how she got involved with Amway, because it does go against what you would expect in this day and age of MLM recruitment. So much of what we talk about on my channel has to do with MLMs operating in this social media era. MLM reps of today will use social media platforms to essentially build their entire business. They promote the business opportunity, they make these posts featuring the products and why you should want to buy them, as well as using the social media messaging features to reach out to people, to find people to recruit, which has allowed for these newer, more modern day MLMs to boom because the pool of people to recruit from is so much larger than it ever was before, and you're not limited to just your physical in-person community of people you see every day. Back in the day, if you wanted to be successful in an MLM, you were limited to recruiting people from places like your church or maybe other moms at your kid's school, other moms on the playground, somebody in line at the grocery store, people from your gym, right? These physical places that you go to and show up at and see people face to face at. But these days, as everything has gone more digital, we're really not engaging with strangers on a face to face basis much anymore. In fact, I think a lot of people would find it off-putting, or they'd kind of put their guard up if a stranger approached them in the grocery store and was overly nice to them trying to strike up a conversation. Your walls go up. You're like, what is it that you want here? But the entire world of strangers is available to you through your phone. And it's perhaps less uncomfortable or more socially acceptable to send a message to someone you don't know behind a screen, which means that you can recruit people and build your teams larger than ever before because you're able to recruit people from all over the world. The modern day MLMs utilize social media this way to grow their companies, but the OG MLMs that your grandparents joined back in the day, like Amway, are still very much stuck in the past. And one of the most popular types of comments I see across Stephanie's platform on all of her videos are, people are still joining Amway? My relatives did that back in the 70s and we knew it was sketchy back then. Or Amway is still around today? Which I agree, it's really perplexing to see somebody this young, 21 at the time, fall for Amway in the 21st century. But her story gives us some insight as to how that was possible. And that's because, first of all, she didn't know what an MLM was at the time, which is a huge pitfall. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what to protect yourself against or what red flags to look out for if you have no clue what an MLM model is or how damaging it can be. So that's a vulnerability in itself. Being young and not knowing what an MLM is might make you more susceptible to fall for it. But second of all, she was approached by somebody in person at her gym, which is so much more rare today. And Amway specifically is one of the companies that I have suspected intentionally discourages social media use. And this is one of the things I would have loved to ask Stephanie directly if I was able to interview her. Like, were you trained or told or taught to stay off of social media and focus more on in-person interactions, because I can see how there are some advantages to that. It's true that the pool of people you're able to recruit is a lot smaller, but those that you do come in contact with face to face, they might be a lot stronger leads. It's a lot easier to delete or ignore a stranger's social media message if it's coming to you through your phone than it would be to ignore somebody in real life who's trying to make a face-to-face connection with you. Chances are you're going to feel socially obligated to engage with these people if they come up to you in public. You don't have to. You could, I guess, just like ignore them, turn around, walk the other way, but that's not human nature, right? And even though it's uncomfortable to talk to people in public sometimes, you're still going to feel obligated to do it, and that's how they have you on the hook. And then if they get you on the hook enough and you end up committing to meet up with them again in person later on to learn more about whatever this opportunity is that they have, you're going to feel a lot more pressure to follow through. It's a lot harder to tell somebody no to their face. It's a lot harder to flake out on somebody when you know it's an actual person that is relying on you to show up somewhere. And I also believe that Amway discourages social media use because then it limits the amount of information you have when you're making this critical decision. And therefore, you're more likely to fall for it. If a stranger messages you on Instagram or whatever and says, "Hey, I'm in Amway. I think you'd be great for my team. You want to know more information about it?" You know what you're going to do? You're going to go to Google. You're going to Google the name Amway and you're going to see all of this unfavorable information about them. And you're probably going to ignore that message and delete it and brush it off and forget it ever happened. But in Stephanie's case, if they're approaching you at your gym that you go to all the time and they convince you to enter this raffle and then they call you later saying that you won the raffle and then they get you to agree to meet with them to claim this prize without really knowing what any of this is about, then they might be able to sink their claws into you just enough where you're not necessarily looking for outside information. You're just believing the one side of the story that you're being told by the people that are trying to recruit you. And she said that this was pitched to her as something that she could make $70,000 a year doing, only working 10 hours a week in addition to her dental assisting job, and that it was going to create this additional stream of stable income that she could benefit from for the rest of her life. As anybody familiar with anti-MLM content knows, these are all fallacies. These things do not happen for most people that join MLMs, but I can completely understand how tempting that would sound to a young 21-year-old who doesn't know what an MLM is. And it's easy to think, oh, I would never fall for something like that. But it's a lot more common than you think, especially when this information is coming to you through a face-to-face interaction with somebody who claims to be successful, who is telling you, here's what this has done for me, it can happen for you too. So that's the story of how she got into Amway. Here's the story of how she got out.
My most requested video, how I got out of the cult that I was stuck in for all of my 20s. So there was this couple, they were dating, they got started on our team like down line. Me and my husband were their mentors. They got sent a video from a family member that was a deep dive into like why what they just got started in was a cult. So they start freaking out and me and my husband are like, hey, calm down. Let us watch the video. We can sit down with you. Let's set up a meeting and we can go through why everything in the video is just not true. Let's just debunk the whole thing. So me and my husband watched this video. Afterwards, I was like, Keelan, we have to cancel that meeting. I can't meet with them and just to their face debunk this thing because pretty much everything in that video, like a lot of it's actually true. So from there, I stopped going to meetings. I stopped listening to audios. I started basically brainwashing myself. My husband was convinced that I was under Satan's attack, that I was possessed by the devil. I know it sounds crazy. Don't judge him. That was literally what we were brainwashed to believe about people that were like, eh. So he was still going to everything, listening to everything, brainwashing himself, and I was unplugging, and I was starting to see more and more clear. And every time I tell this story, people are like, what's the video? I need the video. I need to send the video to somebody. You guys, the video is not the answer. You would have given that video to me 2 years prior. It wouldn't have fazed me like it did at that time. And the reason is because you have to be like ready to accept the fact that you're in a cult. Like you have to be in a mindset to receive that information. If you want a video of what my year prior to this that got me to that point to be able to actually see it look like, let me know. But basically me and my husband fought for like 2 months. Since I was no longer plugging in, he wasn't actively doing as much either. And so he was like, this is kind of nice. Like being able to chill. We never chilled. It was go, go, go all the time. And what really opened his eyes, you guys, is I made him watch the Keith Raniere NXIVM cult documentary. And after watching that, he could not unsee it. I believe that if most people that were still in, if they actually allowed themselves to watch that, they would be able to open their eyes. The problem is they won't allow themselves to watch that stuff. That's like the worst part is not only the leaders brainwashing you, is you brainwash and you gaslight yourself.
The thing I agree with the most out of that I love that she pointed out, was that the information is only going to impact you if you are ready to hear it. I have wholeheartedly believed this for as long as I've been making anti-MLM content, and it's so validating to hear somebody who was in an M for that long confirming it. You can send your friend who's really deep into their MLM all the information and resources in the world about how their company is problematic, and it will not matter to them. They will not receive it, because it's like they have this armor and they're going to let it bounce right off of them, unless you have sense that the armor has already cracked. That's your in. Once they have started questioning things for themselves and they've started to allow themselves to think a little bit more outside of their bubble, that's a signal that they might be more receptive to whatever the other side has to say. But if they've really let the pro MLM information take hold, they're not going to be as receptive to the anti-MLM information. They're only going to find it offensive. And she's admitting that if she had saw that same video even 2 years prior, it would have rolled off of her back. She would have disregarded it or made excuses for it. But there was something about hearing the right information at the right time that led her to actually internalize it, take it to heart, and let that begin her process of deconstructing and eventually leaving this MLM. And I would have loved to get Stephanie's opinion on this, but something I wonder about is that if it's even more severe of a brainwashing dynamic in Amway than it is in other MLMs, because you are so far removed from social media and using the internet to build your business. A lot of what they do is they recruit people in person. There's a lot of weeknight meetings that you attend. They have 5 in-person conferences a year that you're expected to go to. And Amway especially encourages you to consume a lot of self-help materials like books or podcasts or presentations that are oftentimes produced or authored by people in Amway. I personally get the sense that these Amway independent business owners are in way deeper than a typical MLM rep, if you can believe it, because it overtakes their actual life, their actual schedule. They have places to be and people to meet on a weekly basis. And I get the impression that getting out of Amway is a lot harder than it is to get out of any other MLM that operates more remotely, where you're just recruiting people from your phone, you're going to Zoom meetings occasionally, and you can kind of keep your camera off and halfway listen. There's no in-person weekly meetings. There's only one conference a year that's optional. In fact, the next video I'm going to show you from Stephanie is her talking about all the time, like the physical time out of her schedule that she dedicated to this company. But first, one more interesting thing about this clip that I wanted to point out is that she said her husband was not on board right away. She said that her husband believed she was under Satan's attack for starting to question things about the company. And this is another thing that's very unique to Amway: married couples that are in the business together. Of course, this happens occasionally across all MLMs, but I feel like Amway especially encourages you to join with your spouse, much more than any other company I've ever heard of. They're like, if you're gonna join it, you gotta get your spouse in too. And I believe that this is an intentional strategy, because when you recruit couples, that's a built-in accountability partner. If you have 2 people that are buying into everything that's being said, they're drinking the Kool-Aid, that is a lot harder for one or both of them to leave. Very similar to being in a high control religion or a cult. You have so much more to lose, like your marriage, your literal marriage, if you decide to leave and your partner can't come to terms with that. If one person starts to question things, that can cause a rift in the relationship with the person you are closest to. That is a really scary thing to risk, and so a lot of people don't. They continue to stay trapped and go through the motions and push down those feelings of questioning because they're so afraid of the consequences of leaving. And that's part of Amway's strategy and why they encourage couples to join together, I fear. And perhaps all of these factors, that they're pretty much off the social media grid and they're joining with their spouse and they're encouraged to read all of these self-help materials so frequently and attend all these in-person meetings. These are all the reasons cumulatively why people get stuck in Amway for so long, like 9 years or longer. The 5th video of Stephanie's that I'll show you later is where she's detailing all of her earnings versus her losses over the course of these 9 years, and all of the numbers are horrifying. And the number one kind of comment on that video is, why did you stay in this company for so long if you were obviously losing all this money? And I do have several thoughts about that, which we'll get into later, but I think that these things that we've already talked about play such a big role. Amway becomes your life in such an unhealthy way. The next video, Stephanie's, I wanted to show you is really eye-opening because it speaks to how much time she dedicated being involved with this company. This is not some like make millions of dollars working in the pockets of time from your phone kind of situation like so many MLM opportunities lead you to believe. This video illustrates how it literally overtakes your entire life.
I've talked about how much money we lost in Amway in 9 years, but let's cover how much time we spent in Amway in 9 years. It's actually insane to think about. We were literally insane. In our first year of marriage, if you're familiar with DFW, we lived in Fort Worth, which is over here, okay? He worked in Dallas, which was 1 hour away. And with traffic in the morning, it can easily be 2 hours. The meetings were like in Irving, which is like 20 minutes from Dallas, where my husband was working. So every day I would go to work, he would go to work. I worked close to where we lived. After work, we would drive straight to Irving, literally change our clothes in our car, like while we're driving, changing out of my scrubs to put like business clothes on. We would meet up like at a Panera Bread, or if we had like a team meeting that night, then we would meet at whatever hotel that was hosted at, like a Marriott. We would meet with people from 5 o'clock until 9 p.m. 1 hour each meeting, so we did 4 meetings back to back to back. We had no time to waste. These were meetings with people that we were potentially going to bring onto our team, that we either met like at Target or LinkedIn. If one of those 4 meetings canceled, or if we just didn't have a meeting on that time slot, then we would go right across the street to Kroger or Target and just meet people. Then we found a Starbucks that closed at midnight. So from 9 to midnight, we would just go there and meet people there. Then we would drive home and do it all over again. And if it was one of the nights that we had the big team meeting, our whole cult got together, there was a presentation, and we brought guests into that environment to see if they wanted to do this or not. Oh, I'm sorry. It was for us to be interviewing them to see if we want them on our team or not. Those meetings were from 8 to 11 p.m., by the way. And then after the meeting was over, we would all go to a restaurant that we had rented out after hours, eat, and listen to more people talk. Those usually ended around 3 a.m. A lot of times it did not make sense for my husband to drive all the way back to this side of the Metroplex just to get up and drive all the way back to Dallas. So what would he do? He would leave those night owls, that's what we called them, drive to work and sleep in his car. Yeah. And then the next day during work, he would literally go sleep in the bathroom.
I know I keep saying this, but this is another way that Amway is slightly different than these modern day MLMs because it's filling up like your actual real life schedule with places to go. Imagine essentially working 2 jobs. You have your day job that pays you, and then you have your nighttime job that you don't make a stable income at. And in many cases, you actually lose money working at, like we'll talk about next. This sounds like an absolute nightmare to have these weekly in-person commitments where you're getting off work, you're driving across town, and you're staying up until 3 a.m. meeting with people and listening to presentations. Yuck, boring, snooze fest, like get me out of here. Being in meetings from 5 p.m. to 3 in the morning, no thank you. And as you'll learn, you're not making any money during this time that you're spending in these meetings. In fact, you have to pay money to attend. It sounds like everyone chips in $10 or whatever to pay for the cost of the venue. And I've seen little glimpses into these night owls, as they're called, over the years of my anti-MLM content, where they will reserve restaurants after hours. This was a photo I included in a Top Fails video a long time ago of an Amway night owl that somebody sent in. It's literally dozens of people wearing business casual clothing, packed into like a Denny's or an IHOP, and they're just listening to the leader spew whatever nonsense they feel like talking about that night. Stephanie talks a lot in different videos about how she felt like being in Amway was a cult-like experience, and this is one of the ways that I can totally see that connection, specifically regarding keeping the members awake until the wee hours of the morning, brainwashing them with motivational speeches. The BITE model of authoritarian control is what I call the checklist for cults, and there are 4 different categories of control, but one of the characteristics under the behavior control section talks about the manipulation and deprivation of sleep. Nobody is making good decisions at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., okay? You're exhausted, you're delirious, you're not thinking straight because your body is deprived of the rest that it needs to function. So why are we hosting these Amway events that are designed to run through the middle of the night? Maybe it's because it's within the best interest of these large Amway teams to have their members exhausted and delirious and not making good decisions. Maybe because depriving people of sleep helps them suspend the critical thinking skills necessary to recognize that this is all a bunch of bullshit. And to be clear, it appears that these night owl events are not something that Amway as a company mandates or endorses, but it's something that the largest teams in Amway have put into place as sort of an expectation of their downline members. It's a way for you to prove how committed you are, and you are expected to show up and participate in these. Stephanie was a member of the team LTD, which I learned stands for Leadership Team Development. There's also another huge team in Amway called WWG, which stands for Worldwide Group. I believe there are 5 big teams teams or subsets of Amway that when you join, you're sort of placed into one of them depending on who recruited you, I believe. Don't quote me on that. But they're all working the Amway business opportunity, but they each have their own questionable practices that they put in place. And Stephanie makes sure to state in multiple videos across her account that she's not asserting that Amway is a cult necessarily, but it's these big teams or these groups that spawn from Amway, like LTD or WWG. It's the higher ups in these teams that are employing these cult-like tactics to keep their downline members in line, like these crazy late night meetings. It's just insane to hear how many hours were spent on a weekly basis on these in-person events, especially if you remember the opportunity was initially presented to Stephanie like something she could spend 10 hours a week on doing in addition to her full-time job, and that she can make $70,000 a year doing it. Okay, well, you're pretty much spending 10 hours on just these evenings where you're in meetings until the crack of dawn, just kind of hanging around, meeting with people, listening to presentations. So how exactly are you going to be making all this money? When does that happen? And in this next video, Stephanie admits that she's actually spending a lot of money to go to these meetings, not just the admission fees, but in babysitting fees as well, which was one of her biggest expenses.
How much money my husband and I spent when we were in an MLM for 9 years. Weekly, we spent $100 for a babysitter for a training session we went to every single week. The first of every month, we had a subscription to buy products. We weren't really buying products, we were buying points. The standard was 300 points, which equals $1,000. You can have customers buy products that'll help you reach that. Some people have legit customers, cool, but most of us were just buying it all ourselves and then pretending like some of it was customers to the company. Like there's a way to report it saying this much was bought by customers. 5 times a year, we had conferences that were $100 average each ticket. Then we have the hotel room, let's just say average or on the low end, $300 for the weekend. Flights or gas, we always drove because it was cheaper. Say $200 for gas. Babysitters on the low end because they were like friends to us. We still want to pay them, so we gave them $350 for the weekend. So that's $1,050 per conference 5 times a year. So that's $437 every month for the conferences. Trainings were $10 a person. $250 a month for a subscription to some apps where you can message each other within the group and listen to audios, like podcasts. $100 a month to buy books for us to read, but also to give to other people. Every person that we interviewed that was potentially going to become a part of the team, we give a book to. Those were all fixed things, and then we had things pop up here and there like all year long. Gas money to drive all over the freaking country. If somebody got started and they're from Ohio, we're getting in the car with them and driving to Ohio to meet their family and like show them the products and stuff. But the main reason we did that was because that gave us a lot of time in the car together with that new person to build a friendship so that it can kind of lock them in.
It's so refreshing to see somebody that was that deep in an MLM lay out their expenses so explicitly and honestly, because I feel like when you're stuck in one, all you want to focus on is the money you see coming in. You want to be able to flaunt these paychecks and say to people, I make X amount of money every month or every year. Or you want to talk about how it's a low cost to join or no cost to join, or there's no inventory requirement or a low inventory requirement. You're always prepared with these flashy statements about how much you've earned or how much you have the potential to earn in the business opportunity, but rarely are people honest with themselves about all of their expenses, which add up incredibly quickly, as you see. It's not just the ticket into the conference, it's the travel expenses, the hotel, the gas, the airfare, the food, the childcare. And what I'm really surprised that she's admitting to, but that I respect her a lot for admitting to, is the monthly orders that you are required to place that you could fulfill through customer purchases, but she is admitting that she just signed up for an auto ship of $1,000 a month in product on the first of every month in order to hit that requirement without selling to any customers at all. This is what I'm talking about when I say that the reps are the customers in the MLM and that this is a self-sustaining closed system. It's sounding to me, based on this video, like Amway apparently doesn't need outside real customers. It just needs its own independent business owners placing monthly orders pretending that it's going to customers. And I'm thinking, surely this has to be against the rules, right? Many MLMs have language in their policies and procedures that outline that a certain amount of products must be going to a real end consumer, an independent customer who is not you, right? So I did find Amway's policies, and sure enough, they have a 70% rule that says in order to earn your bonuses and recognition, you have to actually sell most of the product you buy. You can't just stockpile them for yourself. And that threshold is apparently 70%. Amway is one of those companies that has an inventory component to it. So you are buying the products from the company. They're getting shipped to your house. You're hoarding them in your garage garage or whatever, and then it's your responsibility to mark up the price and sell it to another customer in order to make that profit. And this is where the reporting aspect of it gets really, really tricky, because there's another section of the policies that essentially says that the 70% rule is partly on the honor system. It says that it's your responsibility as a rep to report to the company how much you sold to customers, and it's your obligation to be honest, it's your obligation to comply with this, but we're also not really checking very much. And while Stephanie is admitting here very bravely and candidly that she did not comply with this 70% rule, and she's insinuating that many other reps in the company don't comply with it either, and that it was somewhat commonplace to just buy $1,000 worth of product on the first of every month, keep that for yourself, not bother to sell it off to anybody else, and then lie to the company and report that you did sell it off. It's seeming like this would be punishable by Amway should they become aware that you're cheating the system. However, it seems to me like this is something the company probably knows full well is happening behind the scenes, but it's really hard to prove that kind of thing, and so the company turns a blind eye to it. Because at the end of the day, Amway is still profiting off of the sale of those products. Do they really care if it ends up in the rep's home or an actual customer's home at the end of the day? No, because they already made their profit on it when the rep bought it in the first place. So the reporting and the tracking for this kind of thing has got to be just a complete disaster, because at the end of the day, how does the company know what you're doing with those products after you've purchased them from the company? They're not going to show up to your house and do an inventory check of all the things in your garage and see what you've kept and what you've sold. So that's why they sort of have this honor system situation, but by nature of relying on people to be honest, you are opening up a loophole for people to cheat. And it seems like, at least from Stephanie's account, that most people are in the practice of cheating. To get even deeper into the hard numbers of Stephanie's 9 years in Amway, she put out this video that has gotten the most views out of anything she's ever posted on her account. It currently sits at 2.1 million views. This was the video I've been tagged in the most, and I think this is the video that is really resonating with people the most because it's so black and white. The numbers don't lie. The numbers tell us a very explicit story that's easy to understand, assuming Stephanie is reporting her numbers correctly, right? So here she is detailing her earnings versus her losses.
I just want to know how much money me and my husband spent in an MLM cult. I got started when I was 21, before my brain was even developed. I'm gonna go through how much money we made, because we did make money, versus how much we spent. Oh, and by the way, we made it to the top 1%, so we were considered successful and leaders. I was a cult leader. My first year, 2016, I made $2,035. My second year, 2017, I made $7,255. My third year, this is the year me and my husband got married, we made $11,172. 2019, $16,470. 2020, we made $32,355. In 2021, we made $60,465. 2022, we made $16,473. In 2023, we made $24,881. And in 2024, the year we got out, we made $22,016. Okay, now for how much we spent. In 2016, I spent $21,433. 2017, I spent $35,530. In 2018, we spent $39,433. In 2019, we spent $55,530. In 2020, we spent $40,265. In 2021, this is the worst year, we spent $58,092. In 2022, we spent $43,790. In 2023, we spent $49,893. And 2024, the year we got out, we spent $37,508. That brings us to a total earned was $193,122 versus spent $381,472. So we lost $188,350.
I know that was a lot of numbers just being listed off, so you may have zoned out, but the moral of the story here is that her and her husband lost $188,000 over the course of 9 years in Amway. She doesn't go into detail about how exactly she calculated these numbers, but I am assuming that the green numbers are just the total of the deposits into her bank account, right? Just go through and see what paychecks did I earn, add them all up. The green column, this is the bright, shiny numbers that reps love to cling to, and they love to flaunt it and advertise it. They love to add up all the deposits and see that they made $60,000 in a year, but they don't often go a step further to total up how much they spent, and therefore they're not seeing that they're actually losing money. So the red column details all the money she spent on the things that she described in the last clip: inventory, marketing materials, travel, babysitting expenses, the online platforms they use. And it's such a shame and a disservice to themselves when people in MLMs only look at the green column, because they're only telling themselves half of the story, which feels good and safe because then you can tell yourself and sleep at night that you're making good money, you're making tens of thousands of dollars. Because acknowledging that you are consistently spending more money than you're making is really uncomfortable. That means that you would have to admit to yourself that this is not a lucrative business opportunity, which then means that you'd have to admit to yourself that you're lying to people when you tell them what's possible as you're trying to recruit them in. This is the cognitive dissonance that so many people in MLM struggle with. They know on one hand that they're bleeding money, but they know on the other hand that they have to position this and make it seem like it's a good opportunity if they're going to successfully convince other people to join, which is their ticket to actually making good money. So it's a chicken or the egg situation. What comes first, the good money or the recruits? And the answer is, if you're being truthful with yourself, it's the recruits. You need a bunch of recruits underneath you to make the good money, but in order to get the recruits, you have to convince them that you're making good money. So what does that mean? You lie. You just tell them that you're making good money even when you're not. So what happens is, to make it easier on yourself to wrestle with this discomfort, you keep your head in the sand about how much you're spending and you just focus your attention on what you're earning and the deposits you see going into your account. The most popular type of comment I see on this video is something to the effect of, "It took you 9 years to realize that there was a financial loss going on. Losing $19,000 the first year wasn't enough of a wake-up call to realize that maybe you should get out. Why would you stay for that long if you're just consistently in the negative?" And that's a really fair question, and it's a hard thing to grasp if you're not familiar with the brainwashing of MLMs, right? Because common sense tells you that if you're losing money doing this thing, then you should probably stop doing that thing. But the mind control and the brainwashing that goes into it makes it extremely difficult to stop doing that thing. The truth is that you can be faced with facts and cold hard numbers and still not see it. You don't want to accept what you're seeing, and so you don't even allow that information in. It's that same dynamic she mentioned earlier, that you're not going to allow in conflicting information until you're ready to hear it and accept it. This is the classic brainwashing you get from surrounding yourself by so many other people in Amway, and you're consuming all these self-help materials that are making you believe that you are in control of your own destiny. You always feel like your big break is right around the corner. Just stick it out. Just keep going. Just keep working hard. One day it'll pay off. And this is kind of a silly comparison and a little bit of a tangent, so hang with me. But just this week, I had to take my daughter to the ER. She's fine. It was nothing super serious. It was in relation to this autoimmune condition she's been dealing with for a couple of months. It's not like she was gushing blood or had a broken bone or anything, but we were referred there by the pediatrician for two things: go get some labs done and talk to a specialist that they had on staff at the ER. The pediatrician called the ER ahead of time and said, "Hey, this kid is coming in. She needs to be seen for these reasons." When I showed up and I checked in, they said, "Oh, we're expecting you." Everything up until that point had given me a certain impression that this was going to be a quick in and out visit for a Monday morning. I was very, very wrong, and we were there for 7 hours. 7 hours in the freaking ER, okay? And the kicker is, we never even got to talk to the specialist, and they tried for 20 minutes to get blood out of my daughter's arm and like in an IV in different places, and they were unsuccessful. So we didn't even get the labs done either. We were there for 7 hours. I literally spent an entire workday sitting with my toddler in the ER for nothing. We ran out of snacks. We ran out of water. My phone was dying and I didn't have a charger. We were getting increasingly irritable. Of course, she's 3 years old. She's getting super impatient and just asking me every 5 minutes if we can go home now. And I'm watching the hours tick by, and it's just killing me knowing how much I had hoped to get done that day. And looking back, I was like, this is a massive waste of my time. Why? Why did I spend my entire day sitting there? Why didn't I leave after the first hour? I could have gone and done so many other productive things with my time. I could have made a different appointment at a different place and gotten these labs done and talked to a different specialist. Like, we didn't have to be here today doing this. I should have left earlier, is what I kept telling myself. And point being, how this all connects is that I felt trapped in that waiting room for so long because I was under the impression that this would be a quick thing. And I was always sitting there on the edge of my seat feeling like our name would be called next. Like, I'm convinced that if I just stay for 5 more minutes, then I'll be the next person person they call back. Just stick it out. Don't quit too early, because you know the moment you walk out that door is the moment they're gonna call your name, right? So the reason I bring all of this up is because I have to imagine this is a similar dynamic for people trapped in MLMs. You are given an impression of a certain outcome, which is why you agree to do the thing in the first place, to commit to it. And the longer you go, you start to realize, damn, I'm wasting a lot of money in my MLM, or in my case, I'm wasting a lot of time sitting here in this emergency room. But you choose to stay because you are so hopeful that what you came here looking for is right around the corner. And there's also an element of the sunk cost fallacy too. Well, I've already been in this waiting room for 5 hours. I must be getting close to the end of the line. I've already wasted this much time. I might as well see it through and get what I came here for, which I didn't in my case, which was so frustrating. Anyway, don't get me started. In the same way that I can imagine you can be in an MLM and you're thinking to yourself, well, I've already spent $100,000, but I've been promised such great success that I might as well stick it out a little while longer to be able to see my big break where I make millions. And of course, you're always gonna look back and you're gonna think, gosh, how dumb was I to waste a whole day in the ER for nothing? Or in Stephanie's case, oh, how insane that I lost $188,000 in an MLM before I finally decided it was time to leave. And that's where a lot of people on the outside can pass judgment. Like, how can you not see it? Why did it take you so long to realize? And I think that this is why. You just don't know the future. You have no way to predict what happens next. You're just going based off of what other people have told you or what you've gotten the impression of. And in the case of MLMs, the entire thing is that you have all these people around you sharing their success stories. You're going to these weekly in-person meetings where you're up until 3 a.m. and someone is telling you about how amazing this opportunity is, how much money they're making from it. You're essentially being promised that you're going to make it big one day, and so you live in this state of hope that it's gonna happen to you at any moment. And at some point though, you have to cut your losses. You have to say, enough is enough. I'm not wasting any more of my time or money here. I am done. And that's the point where people begin the process of deconstruction and where they start to untangle all of these fallacies and these lies that they've been told. So all of that to say, I want to offer compassion to Stephanie and other people like her who have been stuck in MLMs for so long. I don't think that you're dumb, and I can understand how this happened because I've had similar things, albeit on a much smaller scale, happen to me where I stuck with something way longer than I should have because you think you're doing what's best at the time. You're working with the information you have, and hindsight is always 2020. So I want to offer compassion to people who were stuck in MLMs for so many years. It's easy for people on the outside to pass judgment, oh, how could you possibly stay that long? But I think that once you have the full set of information and all of the context behind that decision and the fact that you were under a certain amount of mind control, it does make a little bit more sense. And finally, to conclude this video, I wanted to show you one more of Stephanie's videos where she is opening up about many of the stupid as hell decisions, as she put it, that she made while she was a part of Amway. These are things that seemed normal and reasonable for her at the time, but now in hindsight are feeling so ridiculous, so crazy, and so unbelievable.
Stupid as hell decisions that I made when I was in Amway for 9 years. I told my sister I was not going to be her bridesmaid at her wedding just in case I maybe couldn't even go to the wedding if there was a conference for my business that I had to go to. If it fell on the weekend, sorry, I can't make it to your wedding. Signing another year lease with my roommate for a rental home, and then a month later telling her I'm moving in with my parents, sorry, bye, and I was gone 2 weeks after that. Definitely wasn't good for our friendship. It was my best friend. This was so that I had enough money to put into my business, by the way. Leaving my babies with random babysitters that I didn't even know, didn't even trust, didn't even know. And it was all under the mindset of like, if you're doing what God has called you to do with your life, then he'll take care of your family. Don't even worry about that. Like, just get somebody, God will protect him. And if you did start to stress, then you get gaslighted like, why aren't you trusting God? Why don't you have enough faith in the Lord? Sucking at my job. I stopped caring about my job because I was in an environment that put down jobs all the time. Whenever you're in a cult like this, you get this sense of I'm higher and mightier than everybody else. I know what's up and y'all are dumb. I just started sucking at my job and obviously I got let go. Literally the worst part is I just gave no fucks. Like, I didn't care. I literally didn't care.
This is all part of the deconstruction process, right? Being able to look back on your former self who was under a certain amount of mind control and go, whoa, that's just not me. What a wild thing to decide to do at the time. And I would never make that decision now, given that I have left that high control group. Telling your sister that you can't commit to being her bridesmaid just in case Amway happens to hold a convention on that same weekend. Choosing an Amway convention over your sister's wedding is insane. But also, we can understand that decision better once we consider that she was a member of a high control group that had very strict expectations, and she thought that she was making the best decision for her future at the time with the information she had. And now that she's left and she has different information, she can make different choices. And I think that it shows a lot of growth and it deserves a lot of respect when we see that somebody has left their MLM and they're able to own up to their mistakes and they're able to label these instances as, yeah, that was really messed up and I made a bad choice. It shows that they're making progress in the right direction, they're fully digesting the extent of the damage that being involved with this MLM caused, and they're learning from their mistakes going forward. Just some final thoughts. I want to give major props to Stephanie for her vulnerability, for her honesty, her bravery, and her openness. We really need more voices like hers to come forth and speak about what happened to them. So many people just quit their MLMs and they let it kind of quietly fade into the background of their lives, never to be talked about again, which is understandable because there is a lot of shame and guilt that comes with deconstructing from an MLM, and you realize what you've done, what you were involved with, the harm you have done, the harm that was done to you. It's a lot to process. It's very, very intense. And so I can completely understand kind of like becoming reclusive, trying to process that on your own rather than publicly on TikTok like Stephanie is doing. But on the other hand, it's so vital to talk about how involvement with these companies is harming people so that people can protect themselves from it and decide not to join it. Or at the very least, not feel so alone when they also come to the conclusion that they need to leave and they're also going through that deconstruction process. And I can sit here and make YouTube videos all day long about the dangers of MLMs. Hello, that's what I've been doing for years. But at the end of the day, I've never been in one myself. My voice is only so powerful in that sense. I can only reach so far with what I'm talking about. The more powerful voices come from those who have experienced it firsthand, like Stephanie. So I want to give her major props and also use this video to kind of platform her experience a little further, because I try my best to platform the victims of MLMs through my MLM Horror Stories series where I'm reading emails, but I think it is so much more powerful to hear it coming directly from the source. And with that, that's everything I have for you for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you in my next one real soon.